Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from BNSF Railway, moving our economy for 160 years. Harris Ranch Resort, providing Western hospitality and award-winning cuisine. The Wonderful Company, committed to growing a better world. Comcast, connecting people to the moments and experiences that matter most. Producers Dairy, nourishing one life at a time. The Spencer Family, and Fresno State Associated Students Incorporated, students serving students. The Maddy Report is also made possible thanks to contributions from Cook Land Company, E&J Gallo Winery, the Fresno Association of Realtors, and California Manufacturing and Engineering Company. From the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's 4 public universities, this is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Blake Zante.
Welcome to the Maddy Report. I'm Blake Zante, Executive Director of the Maddy Institute. Today we're sitting down with Assemblymember Joaquin Arambula, who represents the 31st Assembly District in the California Legislature. Assemblymember Arambula, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on the Maddy Report.
Great. Well, let's jump right in. We have a limited amount of time, and we want to get to learn more about what you're working on. But first of all, you were elected in 2016 to the State Assembly, which I believe makes you probably one of the currently longest-serving Valley Assembly members. And you've advocated for healthcare, economic development, infrastructure improvements during your time in the legislature. But what initially inspired you to run for office, and how has your background in healthcare influenced your policy priorities?
I spent 10 years in healthcare on the front lines in an emergency room, and I learned quickly que yo no puedo ver a mi gente solo, that I cannot see my people alone. And I felt the struggles that so many people have when they're going to the emergency department and have systems that aren't working or allowing them to stay healthy. And it really spoke to me about the need for us to be able to have our voices heard within government, for us to participate and to change the very systems and laws that we have. And so I was faced with a very difficult decision about continuing to practice medicine or to ask more of myself and to sacrifice and to choose public service. And I'm grateful that my wife and my community have supported me and allowed me to serve for 6 terms in the state legislature, which does term me out and does allow me to be the senior member that we have here from the Valley. And we've been able to accomplish quite a bit in that tenure in the legislature, and I'm grateful that I've had that opportunity.
Well, and certainly during that time, you've represented a number of both urban and rural communities, even currently in your district. This poses a diverse range of both challenges and opportunities. What do you see as the most pressing issues facing your district, and how have you worked to address them?
For too many of our families, they're struggling to make ends meet today. Whether or not that's from an economy that hasn't been developed and allowed them to have employment that will allow them to keep a roof over their head or enough food on their table, or if it's the rising cost of so many things in our lives right now, like electricity, that families are struggling to make ends meet. And that inaffordability is something that we need to make sure that we're addressing and tackling and helping to solve. And so I look forward to how we can continue to create jobs and innovate here in the Central Valley and develop our economy so that more people are able to exit out of poverty, that more people are able to make ends meet and keep that roof over their head.
And you also serve on multiple committees in the State Assembly. How do these committee assignments align with your legislative agenda and the needs of your constituents?
I've served on health for most of the time that I've been in the legislature thus far, and believe that committee allows me an opportunity to use some expertise I've gained in my life and to focus on issues like public health or healthcare access or healthcare workforce that we've mentioned on the show already, as well as serving on committees like appropriations and rules that helps us to move things along, and emergency management that I believe I also can bring some expertise to, that allows us to find ways to continue to give back. But I will point out, in my tenure, I've also served on higher education, on human services, and on so many other committees that have allowed me to give back.
That's great. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. Energy affordability remains a major concern for Californians, particularly in the Central Valley, where extreme summer temperatures can drive up utility costs. Assemblyman, you recently introduced Assembly Bill 305, which expands the use of nuclear power. What was the genesis behind this legislation, and how do you see it benefiting California's energy future?
Thank you for the question. I first will point out AB 305 was introduced alongside two Republicans, Assemblymember Hoover and Assemblymember Dixon, and it came out of delegations, trips that I've helped to lead in both France and Spain. We went over to those countries to learn about their energy grids and ways in which they make energy more affordable for their communities. And what we found out is they're much more reliant upon nuclear energy than we are here in our state. That even though it's a carbon-free energy source, that we were unwilling or had not been utilizing it as much here as they do in those other countries or across the rest of the United States. Right now, out of our energy portfolio, 11% in the state of California, roughly, is from nuclear. Across the United States, it's 25%, and in France, as an example, it's over 70%. That allows them to be energy independent, to be insulated from some of the geopolitical issues like the war in Ukraine that will help to drive up their energy costs, and are ways in which we can help to address that affordability. So I'm interested in figuring out how we can bring those small modular reactors that will allow us to incorporate and diversify the energy portfolio that we use here in our state and address the affordability crisis that too many families are facing.
Thank you. Speaking of legislation, last year you had 9 bills signed by the governor into law, and they covered a range of topics: healthcare, education, labor. Which of these legislative accomplishments are you most proud of? And could you just maybe share a little bit about some of those bills that you worked on last year?
I'll touch on a few that the governor signed and some that he did right here. First, we signed bills 1888 on labor trafficking that allowed us to address this egregious crime. We signed bills on water safety with Assembly Bill 805. And then we also were able to sign 2240, a bill on farm worker housing that allows us to ensure that we're meeting students' needs year-round. But the one I want to talk to you about in more detail, if I can, is 1830, the first bill that we introduced last year. And it was a bill on corn masa. Too often, many of our families are having birth defects, neural tube defects, things such as spina bifida or anencephaly. Spina bifida is where parts of your spinal canal come out of your back, and anencephaly is where your brain doesn't fully form. It can either lead to paraplegia or death. And what we found were there were disparities, particularly amongst Latinas, because there wasn't a culturally appropriate way for them to ingest, to eat the folic acid needed to help to protect those neural tubes while they were forming. What we did was fortify corn masa, which is the precursor for tortillas and papusas and other foods that so many in our community eat, as a way to decrease these neural tube defects. We believe that this law can become a model for the nation to look at so that we can start helping to reduce the number of birth defects that are happening. And these types of public health laws really allow us to start making major strides and inroads to address disparities in so many communities.
That's great, and certainly an example, as we spoke about in the previous segment about your background in healthcare, of sort of informing your policy decisions. On housing policy, last year you also proposed a bill aimed at clarifying language for first-time homebuyer assistance, but it was vetoed by the governor. Could you just talk a little bit more about this bill? What was the intent behind it? And how can the legislature continue working on this issue?
Dream for All is the down payment loan assistance program that you're speaking about. It's a shared appreciation loan. What we found is that for too many first-time, first-generation buyers of homes, they didn't have the 20% needed to put down on a home, and it was inhibiting their ability to dream of having that first home. And it inhibited their ability to have generational wealth. Well, we appropriated almost $500 million for the first 2 years of this program, and disproportionately that money did not come to the Central Valley. We created and passed through the legislature Assembly Bill 1840 last year that would have expanded criteria so that more families here in the Central Valley could have qualified for that down payment loan assistance program. And through the governor's veto message, we heard that that program was oversubscribed and needed more funding. And so we as a legislature have our work cut out to make sure that we fund it appropriately so that more California families are able to benefit from it.
Thank you. We're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be right back with Assemblyman Joaquin Arambula. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. Healthcare access and workforce development have been key issues in your legislative work, Assemblyman. Can you talk, particularly in addressing physician shortages in the Central Valley? You've been an advocate for expanding medical education, through UC Merced and other regional institutions. Can you talk about some of the key efforts in place to train and retain healthcare professionals in the Valley?
I'll start, if I can, that during my time while I was practicing medicine, I was participating in many mentor programs that provided opportunities for students to see what it was like to become a doctor, a nurse, a respiratory therapist, a ultrasound tech. So often we see things on TV, but we have to meet people who are doing those professions and ask them jobs to start to see ourselves in those positions. Too often you can't be what you can't see. As the first Latino physician that our state has ever elected to the state assembly, we need to provide more of those opportunities so that we can have more community members start to achieve those dreams. So we've worked on those pathways, whether it's the Doctors Academy that start in middle school and high school, or it's the California Medical Scholars Program that works at community colleges, or HPPP, the Health Profession Pathway Program that's at four-year institutions. There's a version of that, HCOP at Fresno State right now as an example. Or if it's the next level, which is medical education, we have to continue to support and build out that infrastructure. Right now, there's been a big movement towards UC Merced, and if you're not aware, they broke ground on a medical education building last year. an award from the Board of Regents. They've accepted their first 2 cohorts of bachelor students who are guaranteed admissions into the medical school, which is to start in 2027. For those of us who are here in the Valley, we know that we can't recruit the doctors in. We have to figure out how to be able to grow our own. And UC Merced will give us that opportunity, and I look forward to how we can continue to build out that medical education collaborative. It's one of the reasons why I've joint authored Assembly Bill 58 this year to build upon the medical education collaborative funding that we at the state have already supported. UC Merced's project, we're looking to supplement it, to grow it so that we can really meet the needs of the care economy. Our population is aging. Here in the Valley, we have half the number of doctors per capita. We need these higher education institutions to be invested in so that reinforcements are on the horizon.
In many rural communities, and that is a major deal for the Valley, many rural communities still continue to struggle though. Where do you see opportunities to fill those gaps in medical training programs to benefit some of those, maybe harder to reach rural communities that don't really have access to, healthcare without driving into Fresno or a larger metropolitan area?
Well, we always can look towards options such as telehealth or ways that we can expand access so that those who are in our rural communities, as well as if we're looking to expand scope for certain types of practices so that they can have the opportunity to be able to practice within those rural communities. There are many options we can do to make sure that our rural communities are not left behind. Having spent 10 years in Selma, I'm very aware of how difficult it is for people to come into our ivory towers, to even come into the city of Fresno, to either take the time or to afford the gas to be able to come into our institutions. And so we have to meet people where they're at. And that oftentimes means we have to look at systems to make sure that we're reaching them and that we're able to address their concerns.
Thank you. We're going to take one more break and then we'll be right back. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. Assemblyman, thanks again for joining us on the Maddy Report today. As your time in the California State Assembly comes to an end, you mentioned earlier term limits for the state legislature. Many are wondering about your next steps and what your future holds. Do you plan to continue working in public service or healthcare? What does the future look like for you?
Well, first, I'll just remind everyone I am a father and a husband, and so I do need to make sure I have this conversation with my family before I'm sharing everything in public. But I do love to be able to serve my community and to be a representative and to be able to advocate and to stand up to make sure that we get our fair share of resources and that we have our voice heard. And so I will look forward to ways in which I can continue to serve on a more local level. I believe it's here locally that we're able to make the most difference. If we're interested in making solutions for our neighbors, we have to stay local and find those solutions here. So I'm looking forward to those conversations over the next couple months as my family and I are focused on how we ensure that we create a place where so many can continue to serve. I know that you are aware, but so often right now families are looking to ways in which they can give back. And public service is one of the best ways in which we can serve our communities. And I'm grateful that I've had that opportunity and would like to be able to continue to serve in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you, and again for your longstanding service in the legislature. Talking about your work in the legislature, you've worked on a number of bipartisan initiatives like the one you mentioned with regard to nuclear power. The Maddy Institute, we promote bipartisan cooperation among future and current leaders, and I was wondering if you might just share, how do you work with members on the other side of the aisle, and what message do you have to future leaders here in the San Joaquin Valley?
I will point out, if I can, that we know here in the Central Valley that so often we have so much more in common than we do apart. And that while it's easy to divide us, that when we find our similarities, when we find areas that we have in agreement, it's then easier to focus on public good. I've been able to have a tremendous working relationship with the mayor of the city of Fresno, who I haven't always agreed with politically, but our ability to see past our differences and to focus on what we can accomplish as we are trying to do the public good has allowed us to then collaborate and to partner. And I would encourage all who are entering into public service to not see it as parties, but to instead see it as how do we serve the public and do better by them.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time on the Maddy Report today, Assemblyman. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into the Maddy Report. To learn more about the Maddy Institute, visit maddyinstitute.com. What makes a community thrive? How do we bridge the gap between government and policy and the people it impacts? The Maddy Institute was founded to answer questions like these, to create a link between government and the citizens it serves, and to inspire a new generation of leaders dedicated to public service. In 1999, the California legislature unanimously established the Maddy Institute in honor of former California State Senator Kenneth L. Maddy. Senator Maddy was widely respected for his commitment to bipartisan solutions and his dedication to the people of California's Central Valley. Known for his ability to work across the aisle, Senator Maddy believed that effective government begins with respectful dialogue, evidence-based policy, and a commitment to the common good. Today, the Maddy Institute continues his legacy. Our mission is threefold. 1, to promote more effective and inclusive government. 2, to encourage civic engagement. And 3, to conduct research on key issues impacting the Central Valley. Through these efforts, we aim to educate, inspire, and empower the next generation of public servants and community leaders. One of the most impactful ways we fulfill this mission is through our internship programs. Each year, the Maddy Institute provides opportunities for students from the Central Valley to work in legislative offices, both in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., as well as local government agencies. These internships give students real-world experience in policymaking, allow them to see government in action, and help them build the skills they need to make a difference in their communities. But the Maddy Institute isn't just for students. Through our civic engagement programs, we create opportunities for everyone to participate in the political process. From community forums to workshops, we bring people together to discuss important issues facing the Central Valley, like water management, air quality, economic development, and education. These events foster open dialogue, allowing citizens to engage directly with policymakers, experts, and others, creating a stronger and more informed community. And to ensure the public stays informed, the Maddy Institute produces the Maddy Report, a weekly public affairs broadcast that covers the latest issues impacting California. Each episode features interviews with lawmakers, journalists, and subject matter experts, providing insights and analysis on topics that matter to our region. Whether it's understanding new legislation or exploring solutions to local challenges, the Maddy Report is a trusted source of information for those who want to stay engaged. At the heart of everything we do is a belief that good governance requires an informed and engaged public. From nurturing young leaders to fostering dialogue, the Maddy Institute is dedicated to creating a future where the people of the Central Valley can thrive. Join us as we continue Senator Maddy's legacy. Together, we can build a brighter future, one informed and engaged citizen at a time. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.com.